This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. Once again, the European economies are beginning to cause real panic and problems for Europe and also for the United States. I wanted to point out to you at the outset here that the European crisis is going to have an effect on American elections and American politics. First, let me tell you what's going on in Europe, kind of a progress report from last week. The Greek economic crisis looks like it might be resolved. Greece is a small country. The government was reluctant to enact reforms that would basically cut spending and maybe get the economy going again. And the prime minister now finally in Greece resigned and said, fine, let somebody else take care of it. And so the Greeks are going to essentially form a new government. It's not like the U.S. Where you have to wait for elections. You can dissolve a government in parliamentary systems any time that the government feels that it doesn't have the support of the majority in parliament. And so there was a little relief that now Greece would sit down and get serious about reforming its economy and getting itself back on track. Then suddenly Italy began to show signs that Prime Minister Berlusconi, who has had all kinds of scandals and other problems and who's been Prime Minister, I think, longer than anyone else in Italian memory, began to lose his majority in the Italian parliament. Some of his supporters in his own party and some of the other parties simply said, we've had it, we need someone in the government who can sit down and draft an Italian financial package and a reform package for the country that will reassure investors. And here's why they needed to do that. Investors began to look at Italy and realize that their economy and their debt on foreign loans, on securities that the government had issued, that is to say government bonds, was huge and out of control. And Italy is much, much bigger and more important than Greece. It turns out Italy is the third largest economy in the European Union, third largest. That was surprising to a lot of people who think of Italy as kind of a small, laid-back, and sort of charming country. It's a big economic powerhouse, but the government has so essentially mismanaged the deficit. Italians retire at an early age, they don't pay their taxes, they have incredible benefits, healthcare, free healthcare, and all kinds of things that was never paid for. And it was financed largely by selling bonds to foreign investors and others and financing on a deficit. In other words, using the credit card of the state to keep the country going. That suddenly created a panic. Investors began to say, Italy doesn't look like they're going to guarantee their notes, their investments. And the price of bonds, of Italian bonds, shot up to 7%. That is to say, the government would have to pay 7% on any money that it borrowed through bonds. 7% is a very high return and is considered to be the tipping point at which it shows that the country no longer has the confidence of investors. That means that is essentially a crisis point. And Prime Minister Berlusconi has promised that he also, as the Greek Prime Minister, would resign, that he would turn the government over to a new coalition, that coalition would bring in more technically oriented people rather than political people to try and fix the economic problem and reestablish the confidence in the Italian government. But investors were not sure that they could trust Berlusconi or the Italians. And just a couple of hours ago when I checked, the stock market was doing very poorly in the US. The Dow was down almost 300 points, which is a tremendous hit. And what this means is that unless the Europeans get their act together, and unless Italy stabilizes its economy and the Greek problem is solved, and the Germans and the French especially can put together a big bailout package and stabilize Europe, the U.S. economy is going to be very, very vulnerable to European fluctuations. And we know that it's the economy, stupid, as Bill Clinton found out, and as Bill Clinton's advisors told him at the time when he was running for president. It remains, it's the economy, stupid, for President Obama in 2012. And the U.S. economy is not likely to recover if the European economic crisis continues to be a flashpoint, and therefore, in a strange and somewhat, I guess, frightening way, the American election in 2012, in part, will be determined by Europeans. In part, it will be determined by Italians and the Italian government, because their actions will heavily influence the state of the American economy, the job creation in the United States, and other issues that will be the cornerstones of the 2012 election. If the economy doesn't recover in 2012 in a significant way, I don't think President Barack Obama is going to get reelected. So I'm watching the European crisis very carefully, and it is not going in a very comforting direction for either politicians or even for people like you and myself who may have a little bit of money in a 401k or something like that. Keep your eye on Italy. We'll keep you informed. This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.